Good morning. Hope you're all doing well, 8th grade. Today we're learning about Prometheus. Prometheus. He gives fire to man against the wishes of Zeus. Not smart. I have uploaded these pages into your class material list. So if you'd like, take a second and pull that up if you want to follow along. And get ready to learn about Prometheus. I'll give you a second. All right, that's a second because you can pause this. Prometheus was the greatest of that race of giants that we talked about, the Titans. And they had descended from Gaia, the earth goddess, and Uranus, the sky god. We also talked about that. Go lay down. Dogs. To please Uranus, Prometheus created men out of clay. There were no women yet, sorry. He made these clay modelings look like the gods. We talked about that earlier, how the gods always crafted their creations to look like them, just on a smaller level. So he crafted the men out of clay and he made them look like gods, but he put into them little bits and pieces of other creatures that he had already made, like the dog, the fox, the deer, the lion, the serpent, the dove. And if you can think of any sort of things that are connected with those animals, you know, the dog for loyalty and the deer for, stealthiness. That's why they did that, to give humans characteristics. So this new creature, man, was a mixture of all of these things. The mixed traits were often at odds with each other because courage might become rashness, which is like jumping into things without thinking about them. And caution might turn into being too timid about things. And curiosity might be good or bad. In the case of Pandora's box, which we'll learn about next week, it was bad. It was really bad. It was so bad. So to balance out these different traits, men required education. Oh, great. So Prometheus, their father or big brother, because after all, he created them out of the clay, he taught them many things. First of all, he taught them how to make sort of crude tools and weapons out of stone and bone. But to go any further beyond stone and to be able to use metal, they needed fire. They needed to forge that metal. However, Zeus was the only one who had fire back then. He knew what a precious commodity it was, and he was the only one who had it. So, too bad for everybody else. He wanted to keep it for himself. He wanted to keep it for himself. He wanted to keep it for his son, Hephaestus. You guys remember who Hephaestus was? He was the one who got chucked off the mountain because he was lame and ugly. And he was also the most loved god. Do you remember that? I hope so. Yeah, he forged all of the king's metals. So, obviously, Zeus needed to make sure that Hephaestus had fire. Zeus feared what men would do if they had fire. He didn't have a lot of faith in mankind, and he really wanted to destroy them all. There was always a chance of war between gods and men, and Zeus knew that. Prometheus, the gentle giant, wanted to keep the peace, but as man's creator and benefactor, he knew his creature would never advance without fire. Give me 1 second. Kingston, go lay down. Sorry, guys. So he knew that his creations weren't going to survive without fire. He decided that he would steal a spark from the heavenly hearth on Olympus, where the gods and the goddesses did their cooking. He did this secretly. He did this very secretly and in a very sneaky way. He caught a spark in the hollow of it was called a fennel stalk. Fennel was like a spice used to flavor sauces. So he stole this spark of fire and he just walked out with it as though it was like a walking stick. Smart, real smart. And he took it down to earth. Men's lives would never be the same again. Prometheus showed them how to make a hearth, how to hold the fire, and then how to build huts around the hearth. And then things got warm and cozy. Let's see. Men began to come out of all of those damp dark caves, and they started to live in houses, and things got really good for a while. Kind Prometheus then taught them more, taught them how to tame the wild animals, taught them how to herd sheep, taught them how to herd oxen and horses, and how to plant seeds in the earth, and how to raise crops and grains and wheat and rye and barley, and basically just overall how to increase their food supply. He also taught them astronomy, which was really, really, really helpful. All about the sun and the moon and the stars, and how to gather plants and herbs for medicines. Finally, he taught them how to write, and he taught them math, arithmetic, and that brought them very close to being a true civilization. But above all, he taught them how to live joyfully and with hope, because he was doing all of these things to improve their lives, to improve their walk on the earth. Zeus didn't like this. He had issued an order that fire should never be given to mortals, ever, ever. And anyone who disobeyed him would be severely punished. Prometheus pleaded for the race of men, pointing out that the earth was getting colder. We were about to enter an ice age, and we were no longer radiating the warmth the earth was that happened in the golden age. Without fire, men would perish, but Zeus wouldn't listen. And one day, as he's up on Mount Olympus, as I had already talked to you about, he saw some smoke rising up from the area it was called Arcadia, in the heart of southern Greece, and he automatically knew that Prometheus had disobeyed him. He was outraged. He considered destroying the entire race of men, but on second thought, he decided to punish Prometheus all by himself, alone. Prometheus, being a god, could not be killed, but he could still be made to suffer, and Zeus was really good at that. Zeus had two servants, Kratos and Baia. Kratos meant power and might, and Baia meant force. They were a pair of twin giants, and so he sent them to a forge in Sicily, Mount Etna. It was the volcanic workshop of the blacksmith god, Hephaestus. The immortal blacksmith was compelled, much against his will, to forge a chain that would keep Prometheus bound for as long as Zeus wanted him to be. However, Prometheus, his name means foresight or forethought, and he knew what was coming. He was well aware of his fate, and he knew what was coming when he decided to steal the fire from Zeus. He knew, but he just outweighed those things and decided that giving fire was more important than watching his creation die. So he went to see his brother Epimetheus. Epimetheus meant afterthought. So we've got Prometheus, pro, before, like a prologue, and Epimetheus, epi, after, like an epilogue. Think about how those words sort of fit in. The Greeks were really good with words, and you guys are going to get a little lesson in that later on too. So, Prometheus and Epimetheus. Prometheus knew what was going on, and Epimetheus was his brother. He went to go see him. So he went and he told his brother that he was going on a really long journey. And he knew that he had been going to go on this journey for a really long time. And he was prepared to accept it, although he hated to leave his beautiful Arcady. He told Epimetheus to take really good care of himself, and Prometheus gave him a large sealed box and told him to guard it well. He also warned him not to accept any gifts from Zeus, because now Zeus was the enemy of man. I want you to remember this. It was a sealed box. Sealed. You'll learn about it in a little bit. Pandora's box. I'll give you a hint. Pandora's box. He gave him Pandora's box. Everything bad was in it. Oh, God. It doesn't get good. We'll learn about that next week. So he then went without resistance with Kratos and Baia and Hephaestus to his place of punishment, which was a high, narrow valley of icy rocks in the rugged mountain of these mountains west of the Caspian Sea. Nothing living had ever grown there, ever. It was just a barren, rugged mountain where no one went. It was going to be very lonely. It was a place of terrible lightnings and gusty winds and whirling snow. And here, Hephaestus, even though he absolutely hated to do it, for he loved Prometheus because Prometheus was so good, and all the gods loved Prometheus except for Zeus. And as much as Hephaestus hated to do it, he bound Prometheus to a huge high rock and he riveted the chains. Kratos and Baia taunted Prometheus. They teased him and they were laughing about, oh, your name means foresight, and how did you not see this coming, and you're going to learn like exactly what you've done. And they just teased him and taunted him, and Hephaestus took no part of it, and they were just sort of like, oh, you want to be the enemy of Zeus? Here it is. This is what you get for betraying him. So Hephaestus, had enough, and he told them to go away, which they did. He then told Prometheus exactly what was in store for him, how he would suffer from the heat and from the cold and from terrible loneliness. And then Hephaestus sorrowfully limped away. Prometheus, alone as no one had ever been alone since the creation of the world, had foreseen the price that he would have to pay for his generosity and kindness to man. He knew it wasn't really Zeus who was responsible for his suffering and pain. Zeus was only an agent of fate, and we talked about this, the fates. They had already everything planned out. So Prometheus, in all of his goodness, said, it wasn't really Zeus's fault. The fates had planned this for him, so he accepted it. And in time, Zeus would have to submit to fate as well, because even the greatest gods have their limits. And so Prometheus accepted his destiny and in his way achieved a kind of victory. He is kind of like the first legendary rebel against injustice. So that's kind of why we love him so much. So good luck with your studies today. Good luck with your narrative writing. I really miss you guys, and I can't wait to see you again soon.